And the distinguished gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, is recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Turner, actually, to pick back up, you mentioned just in the previous line of questioning that about $2 billion of the $7 billion that was in the Recovery Act was actually used for benefit payments, not modernization. Is that correct?
That's correct, and they were allowed to do that within the rules of the expense of those funds. So it was allowed, but that's what happened to it, $2 million, yes.
Do you know what the allocation was of the $2 billion that was used across the various states? Was it like proportionally used?
I can't answer that, I'm not sure.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to get clarification on that because, I mean, look, if a decade ago, which is typical of Washington, we said you could spend X amount of money on this, and then in rulemaking, it gets changed to be used for Y. You know, maybe sometimes we might wonder why some of these things don't get solved. I would actually argue for our colleagues as we appropriate dollars into the future, if we say it should be appropriated for X purpose, it should not be allowed to be used for Y purpose.
I would agree with that recommendation.
Is that fair?
I would suggest, yes.
Actually, to the other IGs, is that a fair recommendation for members of Congress to not be loose with appropriating standards?
I would say, sir, that, you know, the more clear the legislation is, the more clear Congress's intent is on what is to be benefited and what isn't, the more efficient the rulemaking and the guidance will be, and the more efficient the actual administration of the program will be.
All right. No, and look, Mr. Shoemaker, you can comment as well if you would like to.
I would just align myself with the comments.
Well, I appreciate that because, you know, as somebody who's, you know, been a legislator now in 2 different legislative bodies, yeah, clear direction from the legislature, in this particular instance, Congress, is necessary to help you guys do your jobs and the agencies alike. So maybe that's homework for myself and for my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Real quick, Mr. Shoemaker, I know you talked a little bit about the Treasury's do not pay list, excuse me, with respect to the EIDL program. Do you want to expound upon your thoughts about why SBA was not using Treasury's do not pay list?
Yes, thanks for the question. These programs were calibrated for speed, and I believe SBA at the time just did not put that control in place. And then even once they did put the control in place, there is a validation that's required whenever you get a positive hit. And, you know, they're not always, you know, a definitive hit. So it does take resources to verify. So I believe that they calibrated the control environment to not include that just for the sake of speed. And of course, we see the results of that because what occurs is you have that lack of assurance that only eligible entities are receiving those funds.
Okay. I appreciate that. Real quick, a question for all of you, and Mrs. Delmar, I'm going to start with you. Does Treasury have an accurate accounting of the amount of taxpayer dollars that have been distributed to deceased individuals?
I believe overall it does. The problem we have is, I mean, the amounts that go out can be quantified. The problem in the reporting is from the recipients, we don't always get all the data that we need, and we don't get it in a timely fashion. And some of the recipients have their own infrastructure problems that we've seen delays and you know, incomplete responses in the purposes to which the funds
when you say
were
recipients, and not to cut you off, but when you say recipients, do you mean individuals? Do you mean organizations? Do you mean
organizations.
business? Okay. So there are organizations that Treasury sends money to that do not have the necessary, I don't know, enough computers, enough ability to respond back to the information that Treasury requires for dispensing those funds?
We've seen examples of that. Yes.
And Treasury still dispenses the funds?
Well, I don't know off the top of my head, you know, how often and how recently the funds have gone out. We can certainly get you follow-up information on that.
I mean, well, members, look, it looks like we got somewhere else that we got to figure something out, because if Treasury is sending money out and there are requirements for information and the recipients aren't getting that back to Treasury, why are we sending them money? I mean, it's like a simple thing. If I'm gonna give you $10 and I say, hey, but I need this, and you don't do it, you don't get $10 more from me. That's just a personal thing. Real quick, just wrapping up, Mr. Turner, Mr. Shoemaker, I don't know if you can comment. Do your areas, labor or SBA, do they keep track or have an accounting of money going to deceased individuals?
We have $267 million dollars.
Wait, billion or million?
Million,
Million?
yes.
Ooh, you almost scared me with that one. That's $267 million scares me too, you know. Okay, all right.
Yeah, but we identified $45.6 billion. That was part of what we found in our review of those 4 areas, and $267 million of that was for deceased individuals.
45 billion went out, 267. I know I'm a little slightly over, Mr. Chairman. May I ask your indulgence to clarify this point?
We appreciate the gentleman continuing his line of questioning, as any member of this committee would get that to clarify questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Gentleman
Chairman.
may continue.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To clarify, we have $45 billion through the auspices of the Department of Labor that have gone out, of which $267 million has gone to deceased individuals.
Yes. And that's potential fraud, but yes, the number 267 million is correct.
All right. Listen, thank you so much, Mr. Turner. Mr. Turner, thank you for the indulgence, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.